everyone. My name is Diana Shulak. Welcome to our Family Focused Resource Center's workshop today that we are in collaborating with the Disability Rights California. Family Focused Resource Center is a resource center that helps families that have children and adults with disabilities. Everyone who works at Family Focused Resource Center is a parent of a child, parent or relative of a child or an adult with a disability. So we understand what most of you are going through, and we've been there. So part of what our mission is we like to present as much information as possible to our families. And luckily, we have great agencies like Disability Rights California to help us with this. And today you are here for Medi-Cal Waiver. I'm going to pass it over to Raymond, and he's going to tell us a little bit more and get started with our workshop. So thank you very much, Raymond. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you again for having us here today. And thank you all the participants for being on time. My name is Raymond. I am one of the advocates here at Disability Rights California. With me today is one of our other advocates, Carla. She'll be monitoring the chat, and our presenter today is one of our senior attorneys, Maria Ariate. So a quick overview of who we are, what we do. Disability Rights California, or DRC. We are a statewide nonprofit, and we provide free legal services to people with disabilities. With any disability-related issues, we have offices statewide, and our attorneys and advocates can handle different subject matter, such as access or discrimination with housing, transportation, education, employment reasonable accommodation issues, public health benefits, such as Medi-Cal, in-home supportive services, and Social Security overpayment issue that relates to work. And within our agency, we also have different programs, such as our Office of Client Rights Advocacy. They specialize in helping clients of the regional center. And our Client Assistant Program, they specialize in helping clients of the Department of Rehabilitation. So as our host said, everything you see today will be recorded and also sent to you after the presentation. So any links you see in the chat, the presentation material you're seeing on screen right now, you'll receive them afterwards. Questions and answer will be at the end. And during the question and answer portion, if I may ask you all kindly to keep on topic to the subject matters. So if you have questions about Medi-Cal waivers, feel free to ask them. If you have more specific question that relates to your specific situation, please reach out to us for a one-on-one appointment. This is to protect your privacy, so you don't share your information, when in a group setting. And our number is in the chat. It's 800-776-5746. And our numbers are open. Sorry, our phones are open Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Friday from 9 to 3. So without further ado, Maria, please take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So today, as it has already been said, we're having a training on Medi-Cal waivers. What are they? We're going to talk about the different waivers under an umbrella called the Home and Community-Based Services waivers. So that I can describe what waivers are, I think we need to go back in time and just learn a little bit about Medicaid. And so back in the day when California decided that it wanted to participate in the Medicaid program, states don't have to. But California decided it wanted to. It had to submit what is called a state plan to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, the federal agency that administers the Medicare and Medicaid programs nationwide. And so at some point, CMS approved the state plan. The state plan has information on how California is going to manage its program. They call it Medi-Cal here in California. Other states call their Medicaid program other names. And so it includes what programs there are going to be, who's covered, what benefits are going to be offered. There are mandatory benefits that must be offered because the federal government says you have to. And there are a lot of optional programs that the state doesn't have to cover. California covers a lot of optional programs, but if money gets tight, California can eliminate covering those optional services. And so that's what the state plan is. If you ever want to see it, you can always look at go to the link and you can find it there, the updated version. So there are two ways that the state can change or modify its Medi-Cal program here, or any state, its Medicaid program. The state can either submit an amendment to the state plan or seek approval to waive some provisions of the Medicaid requirements, because when California agreed to participate in the Medicaid program, it agreed to follow the federal laws. And there are federal laws that need to be followed unless the federal government waives them. So waivers allow states to not follow some of these federal rules. And waivers are really Medi-Cal services, extra services for subpopulations of people. That's what a waiver is, essentially. And so in California, we have different waivers or umbrellas of waivers, depending on what section of the Social Security Act we're looking at. So Section 1915C is the section on home and community-based waiver services, and this is the focus of today's training. There are other waivers under Section 1115B, 1115 or 1915B. And if we go to the Department of Healthcare Services website, why? Because Department of Healthcare Services is the single state agency in the state of California that administers the Medi-Cal program. And since waivers are Medi-Cal services, then you're going to find all of the waivers in their website. And we have current waivers, so you can see that there are different waivers depending on what section of the Social Security Act we're talking about. And then we've got all these 1915C waivers. We've got, a lot of you will probably recognize at least one of them, which is the Home and Community-Based Services Waiver for the Developmentally Disabled. So that's called the DD waiver. People call that the DD waiver. And then there's the Self-Determination Program waiver also. So those two waivers are administered through the regional centers. And you have to be a regional center consumer to be able to apply for these waivers. So if I'm not a regional center consumer, I can't apply for these waivers. So, but anyway, we're going to do a closer look at these waivers under 1915C. There are pending waivers, expired waivers. So everything you want to know about the waivers is here. And if you click on to the link for any of these waivers, it'll take you to the actual document, because the waiver is a document, right? The state has to, if the state wants to modify something in its Medicaid program, it has to submit a document to CMS. So waivers are extra services for subpopulations of people. It is a document too that needs to be approved by CMS. And these documents are over 300 pages long, each one of them. So there's a lot. You want to know anything and everything about the waiver, you go directly to the waiver. That's where you're going to find out about the waiver. And we're going to go to the DD waiver once we get to that section. But there's more background information that you need to know about waivers generally. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the focus of the rest of the training is on these home and community-based services waivers. So you think about this as an umbrella, and underneath all this umbrella are these 1915C waivers. But what are waivers? All of these waivers were developed as an alternative to institutional care. So what's the goal?
That's nice.
I'm sorry, could you
That's awesome.
Mute yourself, please? Okay. So these waivers are to provide services and supports in the community so that people do not have to go into an institution, because Medi-Cal will cover for you to go into a nursing home at different levels of care or different institutions. So the whole purpose of these waivers is to keep people at home and provides the kinds of services that they need. Remember earlier I had mentioned that waivers are asking the federal government to waive certain requirements. So there are two important ones for waivers: comparability and statewide-ness. So statewide-ness is the federal law says that if you're going to offer Medi-Cal to or Medicaid to your people within your state, you have to offer it statewide. It has to be made available statewide. You can't just say California, for example, we're only going to provide Medi-Cal to Southern California and not Northern California, only to certain counties. No, it has to be offered throughout the state. So that's statewide-ness. The other one is comparability, and that means that for people who are on full scope Medi-Cal, they should be able to request any of the services that are in the state plan, right? They shouldn't be limited. Now, whether you get the service is another matter, because you have to meet criteria. You have to meet the medical necessity criteria at a minimum. So, those are the two big ones that are waived. Because remember, waivers are extra services for subpopulations of people. And let me explain how it would differ if I only had Medi-Cal. Let's say that I live at home and I only have Medi-Cal, and I'm at the point where I need nursing facility level of care. If I just have Medi-Cal, my only options are really none, because I could apply for IHSS, but IHSS doesn't give me a nurse at home. And I would try to make do with what I could, maybe some home health. But I need someone to be with me. I need a nurse to be with me, for a period of the day. Well, if I just have Medi-Cal, I can't get a nurse at home. But if I apply for a waiver, and that waiver has nursing services at home available, then if I apply for the waiver and I qualify for the waiver and I have Medi-Cal, of course, I'm going to be able to get nursing care at home. Whereas if I don't have the waiver, I can't get nursing care at home. I have Medi-Cal, but I can't get nursing care at home. So I'm going to repeat this a lot because I think this is probably the best way to describe it. Extra services for subpopulations of people on Medi-Cal. So the waivers also target groups. You're going to see that some of these waivers are targeted by age, by disability, and not all these, not everyone can apply for a waiver, because some waivers are not available statewide. Remember, you waive statewide-ness. So you're going to see that some waivers are not available throughout the state. Depends on what county you live in. And for all of these home and community-based services waivers, a criterion to qualify for a waiver is that you have to show that if you were not living at home, you would meet the criteria for entering an institution at the level of care, at the levels of care as described in the waiver. Because why? Because the reason for these waivers is to keep people at home. So you've got to be able to, if you weren't living at home, meet the criteria to be able to enter an institution at the level of care or the levels of care set forth in that waiver. It doesn't mean you have to go. It just means that you have to meet the criteria. And so again, states can choose. States have caps. Waivers, except, all waivers have caps, but there's only one waiver where there's no waiting list, and that's the DD waiver. But you'll notice that with some of these waivers, there are waiting lists because it's capped at a certain number of people per year that can get on. So there will be waiting lists with some of these waivers. And so the state, in order for CMS to approve the waiver, the state has to show that providing services through the waiver will not cost the state more than what they would pay if the person were in an institution, that the waiver is going to protect the person's health and welfare, that there are going to be adequate and reasonable provider standards, and that services follow an individualized and person-centered plan of care. So plans of care are important. So here in California, these are the current waivers that we have. We have the Medi-Cal Waiver program. It's the AIDS waiver. It's available to everyone with AIDS. Now, there's more criteria than this for each waiver to qualify, but I'm just giving you sort of a big picture view here. It's available statewide. The assisted living waiver, only for people who are disabled, over 21 or over, only available in 15 counties. You see how it's not statewide anymore. You see how it's limiting based on age, or the HIV waiver based on disability. The home and community-based alternatives waiver, available to everyone, any age, statewide. The DD waiver, available to people who are regional center consumers, statewide. The multi-senior services program is only available to people 65 or older, only available in 46 counties. And the self-determination program waiver, you have to be a regional center client, and it's statewide. Okay. Okay, so you cannot be on 2 HCBS waivers at a time. So if you're on the DD waiver now and you want to move into another home and community-based service waiver, you have to disenroll from the DD waiver to get on, say you want to go on the HCBA waiver. So, by the way, regional center consumers are not limited to just the 2 waivers that are administered through the regional center. If I'm a regional center consumer and I want to get on the MSSP waiver and I qualify, I can get on, but then I have to get off the DD waiver. So, waivers have some similarities. These waivers do, but they offer different services. And this link will take you to a document that compares some of the service, like the DD waiver versus the HCBA waiver. So if you want to know, what it is. Some people ask, well, what waiver should I be on? I have no idea. You've got to look at your needs. You've got to look at each waiver. Appendix C of all of these waivers has information on all of the services available through that waiver, who can provide the service. So you'd have to do an analysis of what your needs are, look at the waivers you're thinking about, and figure out, what waiver offers the services that you want. Also, remember, like the HCBA has a waiting list for a lot of people. The DD waiver doesn't. So that's another factor to consider. Are you going to be on a waiting list if you get off one waiver and want to get on another? You'd have to reach out to the agencies that administer the waiver to figure that out. So I can't answer that question, like which is the best waiver for me. It's really, you need to analyze it and figure it out. Someone asked, well, can the regional center tell me what waiver? I doubt it. I think they can tell you about the DD waiver perhaps and the self-determination waiver, but they're not going to really know about these other waivers. So the onus is really on you for the most part to figure out what waiver works for you. So now let's talk about the DD waiver. Like I said before, there's no waiting list for the DD waiver. And so you can apply, and if you get approved, you could get right on. It's administered through, so the Department of Developmental Services administers the whole regional center system, responsible for making sure that regional centers follow the law, etc. And there are 21 regional centers in the state of California. So if you wanted to get on the DD waiver, you would be talking to the service coordinator about that. And remember, I need to stress this. You don't have to be on a waiver to receive regional center services. What the waiver does is if in your IPP there are services that would be covered by the waiver, then the regional center doesn't have to pay it out of its budget. It's actually being paid by Medi-Cal. So it behooves the regional center to get as many people on the waiver if the waiver can pay for some of the services that are the responsibility of regional centers. That's really what the waiver does for regional centers. It helps pay for services. And we're going to go to the DD waiver in a moment, but I just want to get through some of these slides. Now, to be eligible for the DD waiver, remember every waiver has its own eligibility criteria. Just because you're a regional center consumer doesn't mean that you automatically get on the waiver. You have to be receiving a service from the regional center. That means being an active regional center consumer. That's what that means. Yes, there are people who are regional center consumers who are not receiving any services. You have to, well, of course, you'll be on full scope Medi-Cal. If you get on the waiver, you have to obviously qualify for Medi-Cal too. And again, if you were not living at home, you would have to meet the criteria for entering an intermediate care facility for the developmentally disabled. And there are 3 levels of care that the waiver talks about, and we're going to look at those. Not currently enrolled in another HCBS waiver, because remember, you can't be on more than one at a time, and that you choose to receive the services through the waiver and reside in the community. Now let's talk about institutional deeming. So sometimes I ask people, well, what waiver are you on? Well, I'm on the institutional deeming waiver. And I say there's no such thing as the institutional deeming waiver. Did you see in the list that we looked at earlier anything that said institutional deeming waiver? It doesn't exist. I'll tell you what it means. So some of these waivers, like the DD waiver, the alternatives waiver, the MSSP waiver, and other waivers, have language in the waiver that says, so if this person qualifies for this waiver, then you, Medi-Cal eligibility worker, will pretend that this person is living in an institution, and therefore there's no deeming. So what is deeming? Deeming means that if you're a minor, and you apply for Medi-Cal under the regular rules, Medi-Cal will look at the parent's income, the parents with whom the child lives, that income, and count it as if it were the child's income. And that can disqualify the child from getting any Medi-Cal. Now, remember, the child may have his or her own income, and that's considered. If you're a spouse and you want to apply for Medi-Cal, well, your spouse's income will be deemed to you as if it were yours, and that may disqualify you for Medi-Cal. So deeming, that's what deeming is. So if you qualify for one of these waivers where institutional deeming is allowed, it just means that Medi-Cal is not going to look at the parent's income or the spouse's income to determine eligibility for the person who's applying for Medi-Cal. Okay, but they will look at the child's income. They will look at the spouse who's applying that income. And there's other criteria that you need to meet to qualify for Medi-Cal. That's what institutional deeming is. So the process, you're going to, if you want to apply for the DD waiver, you've got to start with the regional center service coordinator. There's an application that needs to be filled out. And that's what starts the process. So services, DD waiver services that you receive cannot be limited. So the regional center can't use purchase of service guidelines to limit the services, because remember, those are Medi-Cal services and they have other rules. Under the DD waiver, you get an extra vehicle exemption, but be careful. You might be on other programs where you can only have one vehicle. So you need to consider that. If the child no longer qualifies for the DD waiver, because every year there's a reevaluation, then the child's Medi-Cal doesn't get cut right away. It continues until the next time the child is reassessed for Medi-Cal. So the child has a little bit more time to be on Medi-Cal if the child no longer qualifies. That's called continuing eligibility for children. Services under the DD waiver include these and many more. We actually have a manual, Rights Under the Lanterman Act, in Chapter 10 talks about the DD waiver. Sorry, Chapter 11 talks about the DD waiver. And the link to our manual is right there. So in order to get services through the DD waiver, right, they're Medi-Cal services. So you have to meet the medical necessity standard. And that means that whatever you're asking for under the waiver has to be reasonable and necessary for the treatment of the disability or developmental condition. And the service has to be specific, effective, and skilled. So once you're found eligible for the DD waiver, you're reassessed every year to make sure you still meet the criteria to be on the DD waiver. Okay. And there are people within the regional center system that are called qualified intellectual disabilities professionals. They're the people who know about the waivers. They're the ones who help with the application, the reassessment. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this and I'm going to open up the link to the DD waiver. Now you notice that this link takes us directly to the DDS website, but you can find the waiver by going to DHCS because DHCS waivers are Medi-Cal services, and of course they're going to be on the DHCS website, but because the regional center administers these waivers, then they're also on the DDS website. So here we have the Home and Community-Based Services Programs website for DDS. Now, 1915C waiver, you know what that means now, right? And then we've got a primer on the waiver. We've got the self-determination information on that. We've got a Spanish version. And then if we scroll down here, this is where we would find the waiver itself. So it's 407 pages, this waiver. So every time you open up the waiver, there's a letter from CMS saying, oh, we're approving your last amendment to the waiver. And this was your amendment. And the waiver continues to be cost neutral because you remember the state can't be paying more for waiver services than what it would pay if you were in an institution. And congratulations. Anyway, so the waiver is 407 pages. This talks about the purpose of the HCBS because this DD waiver is an HCBS waiver. And it was the proposed effective date of these amendments are January 1st of 2025. The actual waiver that's being amended started in January 1st of 2023. And these waivers typically go for 5 years, and then they have to be, the state has to, submit another waiver for the next 5 years. So this is Appendix A is how the waiver is going to be administered. Appendix B is everything about eligibility for the waiver. Appendix C is where you're going to find all of the services and who can provide the services. And Appendix D, participant-centered service planning and delivery, safeguards, or G, cost neutrality, where the state shows that it's going to be cost neutral, financial accountability. All these waivers, all these home and community-based waivers have the same format. So for all of these waivers, your Appendix C will always be services. Appendix B will always be eligibility. So the format will always be the same. And so this is known as the HCBS waiver for Californians with developmental disabilities, good for 5 years, started in 2023. And then this is the levels of care that need to be met in order to qualify for the waiver.
Excuse
So-
me, Maria.
Huh?
In the chat, they're saying that they can't see the slide that you're working on. It just still says individual waiver.
I'm on the waiver. I'm not on a slide.
Okay.
I don't understand. Patricia,
It just said if you're sharing an additional screen, we can't see it. We are seeing the slides, and then somebody else. And now everybody's saying now they can see this. This is not what you had
thanks.
up before.
Okay. Guys, you need to tell me sooner.
Yeah, they mentioned it in the chat. But
Okay.
they just mentioned it right now. So
Okay, thank you.
yeah, we're good.
So,
Thank you.
this is the letter from CMS. This is the waiver, 407 pages. This is what I went through. 2023 is when the waiver was approved. The reapplication, the amendments are effective 2025. These are the different appendices to the waiver. So B, C, D, E. C will always be services. B will always be eligibility. For any of the HCBS waivers, the format is the same. Now levels, so this is the name of the waiver under B. And for 5 years. And levels of care that need to be, one of these levels of care need to be met to qualify for the waiver. It's not the only criteria, but it's a criterion. So intermediate care facility for individuals with intellectual disabilities. At what levels of care? DD, habilitative, or nursing. And where are you going to find this information? In Appendix B, because Appendix B is all about eligibility criteria. And so again, it describes the waiver here under brief description of the waiver, who administers the waiver, etc. And then again, the appendices are here. So if you want to know all about services, you're going to go to Appendix C, and it's going to tell you everything you ever wanted to know about what services this waiver provides. And so you see 407 pages, and we're barely on page 7. So an appendix C will be lots of papers, lots of pages, because lots of services. So that's what the waiver, all these waivers look like. They look the same. Obviously, the language is going to be different because each waiver is different. But anyway, so the link that I just opened was the one right here. But again, you could open up the same, you can open up the DD waiver by going to DHCS. Now, the self-determination waiver is also administered by regional centers, and it allows more freedom to self-direct services. And if we go to the bottom link is the self-determination waiver itself, but the top link here, if we open it up, is the DDS website that talks about the self-determination program. And everything you wanted to know. There's an orientation that you need to go through. Program directives. These are directives from the director of DDS to regional centers about whatever they want to communicate. Frequently asked questions. The self-determination program ombudsperson's office. Financial management services, their involvement in the process. If you want an independent facilitator, it talks about what they are, what they do, tools and resources, program updates. You're going to have a plan put together and a budget and a spending plan, budget. That all has to be approved. And like they said, it really gives you more freedom to with regard to services and choosing what it is that you want. You can do a whole training on self-determination, but if you do, if you're interested, you should talk to the service coordinator. You should look at this website, um, and decide if you want to be. Now, let me just say something so that I don't confuse you guys further. There's something called the self-determination program and the self-determination waiver. You can be in self-determination program without being on the waiver. Being on the waiver will allow that more services that are available through the waiver be paid for by Medi-Cal rather than the regional center, right? Because there seems to be confusion out there. Oh, I'm on the self-determination program, but I'm not on the self-determination waiver. I'm still on the DD waiver. Yeah, that's okay. The DD waivers could probably be paying for some of those services that you're getting through self-determination anyway. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. So let's go back to, does Family Focus, do they also help people with self-determination, Patricia?
We do not.
Okay.
Our community navigator program does not help create your self-determination because you do have to use or it's recommended to utilize a independent facilitator, an IF, and now there are so many agencies that do that.
Yeah.
So it's really best to go through someone who has knowledge of the program.
Yeah, that's true. The orientation will be helpful to you guys to understand more. Disability Voices United, they have a lot of information on the self-determination program. They have bi-weekly, bi-monthly calls that people can join to talk about issues involving self-determination. So I strongly urge you to reach out or look at their website for more information too. So the third waiver I want to talk about is the Home and Community-Based Alternatives Waiver. It's, like I said earlier, for anyone in the state of California, if you meet the criteria. There's usually a waiting list, except I'm not going to go through the next couple of slides because I'll bore you to death, but there are waitlist priorities. So it's possible that if you are in one of these priorities, you might be able to cut into the front of the line. But if you can't, then you will wait until slots open up for you to get on the waiver. It used to be before that you were given a budget under this waiver. Now there's really no budget. It's based on what you need, and what the doctor says in the plan of treatment. The kinds of services you can get from the waiver are many. You would go to Appendix C of this waiver to learn about all the services and who can provide the services. It has something that's called waiver personal care services that's not available in any of the other waivers. I was doing a training on the DD waiver, and someone in the audience indicated that their application for the waiver personal care services, waiver personal care services was taking too long. And I said, well, it's not through the DD waiver because the DD waiver doesn't provide for waiver personal care services. It's only the alternatives waiver. So if you want to get on waiver personal care services, you've got to disenroll from the DD waiver and get on the HCBA waiver, and hopefully there's no waiting list, and hopefully you qualify to get on the HCBA waiver. But what are waiver personal care services? Basically, if you have IHSS, and why don't I open up your doctor? Let's say that I have IHSS and I obviously need nursing care at home, and trying to look for the And, oh, I can't find it. Now I can't find the document. So let me just explain it so I don't have to worry about this. And there's a link to the bottom link here doesn't work anymore, but if you look in chat, top of the chat, there's a link for waiver personal care services. So let's say that I'm on the HCBA waiver and I have all these needs that need to be met by nursing care, but I can't find nurses to cover all of my needs. It's not happening. And there is that problem. So what do I do? So one of the things I can do is say to the HCBA people, hey, I have IHSS and I want to be able to cover my need. But I can't find any nurses. And my doctor says it's okay for the services to be provided by someone without that nursing facility, that nursing level of care licensure, right? Without an LVN level of care. So that way my needs hopefully are being met through the waiver personal care services person and my in-home supported services. But my doctor has to agree that that person is capable and my doctor has to be comfortable with that person providing the service is enough for me. Because if my doctor doesn't agree that my Aunt Rose can be the waiver personal care services provider, then it's not going to happen. There's a link here when a parent provider of a minor child or a spouse can be a waiver personal care service provider, and you have to show extraordinary care need is needed. The same IHSS overtime rules apply to waiver personal care services too. But this is really for people who need nursing care at home and they're just not being able to fill the need because really they're not finding the nurses to do that, right? They may be able to get some of the care from nurses, but they're not able to fulfill the entire need. So and it's only available through the HCBA waiver. How do you apply for the HCBA waiver? You go onto this link and you find the waiver agency in your area. You call them up and say, hey, I'm interested in applying to the HCBA waiver, and then they'll start the conversation there. The next waiver is the assisted living waiver. Provides assisted living care coordination and other services for people who are either living in a residential care facility, for the elderly, or in subsidized housing. Of course, you have to have full scope Medi-Cal, age 21 or older, have Medi-Cal without a share of cost, meaning you're not paying out of pocket for you to have Medicare every month. And you need to meet the levels of care as outlined in the assisted living waiver, right? And this assisted living waiver is only available in the counties that you see here. And services, you want to know about all the services that are available through the assisted living waiver? You go to Appendix C of the assisted living waiver, and that's where you're going to find all the services and who could provide the services. But these are just some of the services that are available: personal care, chore services, companion, medication oversight. There's going to be on-site direct care staff to meet unpredictable needs or scheduled needs. Of course, you're going to have a plan. The waiver, if you want to look at it, you could find it there. If you want to apply for the assisted living waiver and you live in one of those counties, you call the care coordination agency in your county, and it's there. The actual waiver, if you want to look at it through DHCS, it's right here. I actually helped a client get on this waiver. She was living in San Diego. And so her son reached out to us because she was starting to have memory issues. And so her son was concerned about her, you know, taking her medications and eating and just caring for herself. And so I reached out to the Care Coordination Agency in San Diego County, and they were really helpful. They actually found a way to get her on, is all I can say. But yeah, and it was very, very helpful to her to be able to get services through the assisted living waiver. The Multi-Purpose Senior Services Program, we call it the MSSP program. You have to be 65 or older and disabled. You have to meet the levels of care as indicated in this waiver and other criteria. And you have to be residing in one of those 46 counties and you can look up the counties here in this link. So remember, it's not available in all of the counties, but most counties. And some of the services that you can get, go to Appendix C of this waiver, and you'll see all of the services that are available. But some of them include care management, adult daycare, minor home repair, maintenance, respite services, transportation, meal services, etc. And with some of these waivers, there might be wait lists in some of these counties. Excuse me. How to apply? You open up this link and you look for your county, and you'll see the agency that administers that waiver in that county. And lastly, the Medi-Cal Waiver program, it used to be known as the AIDS waiver. It's going to provide case management and direct care services. Look at Appendix C of this waiver and you'll see all of the services that are available. Of course, you have to have a written diagnosis of HIV/AIDS. Be healthy enough to receive care at home. You have to meet if you weren't living at home, you would meet the levels of care as indicated in the waiver. And to find a provider, you would look up the first link, and to apply, you would go to the Office of AIDS. So we have come to the end of the presentation, and we're going to go ahead and turn off the